Hola, buenos días.
Good morning. I'll be speaking about nutrition, the importance of nutrition in environmental medicine. I've divided my presentation into three parts. First, I'll be speaking about basic concepts on nutrition, biochemical aspects, and its importance in our therapeutic armamentarium. Firstly, this is a complex activity. It is necessary to replace the nutrients that we require and to maintain health in the optimal status. But this is linked to sociological, cultural, ecological, symbolic aspects. We should take that into account and should not forget that, and also use that when determining the appropriate nutrition or diet of a person. A human being is omnivorous. That's why the food that we take are more varied. It is of animal origin or vegetable origin. As Fischler said, man is an omnivorous being that has freedom of choice. The primitive man had to adapt to different environmental conditions. Genetic adaptation helped man to survive in different conditions. Our genetic code was developed millions of years ago, and at the time when the species had to eat to survive using essential nutrients, and also we are able to adapt to this setting, this environment. But we are not familiar with the different chemical substances that are present in food, and they are toxic to the organism. The choice of food was based on the availability of foods, easy access to food, um, culture and religious beliefs and socioeconomic factors, and also at the individual level. This depends also on our taste, its palatability of the food, hunger and satiation of hunger and physiological needs. Here are three pictures that I have put up here on the slide. The Eskimos basically eat fish because that's available in their setting. In certain African tribes, food is based chiefly on cereals. And you have these different types of food. The Japanese food, for instance, it is a society that has a culinary culture that is basically on this type of food because they had scanty resources at that time that could be obtained from their environment. So what they had to do and what they did was to refine the cooking and the food preparation procedures. Our beliefs also, religious beliefs and beliefs in general have an important impact, especially as said before. Certain animal species may be considered as edible or not. In insects, for instance, in Latin America, Africa, or Asia, they're considered to be edible, and they're also nutritive. In North America, well, it's not considered to be food. A dog, which is a domestic animal, is eaten in other parts of the world, but not in the other parts. Concerning industrialization of food, technological innovation has led to preservation, transformation, processing, and genetic manipulation of food. That food is today, undergoes today different techniques for preservation, genetic manipulation is done, and also there is big multinational companies that that work in this sector. They basically control everything. You have a global market. There's a saturation in the market. There are new and newer products, and new needs are created. And product no longer we no longer know where the products come from. We may be taking food that comes from different parts of the world because we do not know where they come from now because of the global market, and there are problems arising in that regard. For instance, we had problem with the cucumbers, Spanish cucumbers in Spain. It was a produce of Spain. The problem was occurred in Germany because of lack of control of all of these substances that are available in the market today. Now we have functional food, light, low-calorie food, food that are packaged in modified atmospheric or environmental settings, pre-cooked food, frozen food, food that are ready to eat, enriched foods, nutraceutic foods, and nutritional substitutes. We have also additional coloring, favoring additional chemical products added to the food. Choice of food today is much different as what we had in the past. Today we have access to a wide variety of food of different types. We no longer have this culinary culture. There's a mix of cultures that due to the global market. Quantity and price ranks first before quality. Added value of new food is what we're looking for now. We're not only interested on basic content of food, but we want to have food that has low cholesterol and also low sugar level. Preservation and also shelf life of food is important today. We want something that we can prepare fast in little time. Marketing campaigns are creating new needs today. If today it's no longer enough to have lettuce. It's necessary to eat lettuce that is washed, that's already cut up, etc. So marketing also creates these new needs. Food safety is different depending on different countries. In developing countries, in underdeveloped countries, in developing countries, we have to ensure availability and access to the to food. And today, what we are looking for in the developed countries is to ensure that that food is safe. The FAO data for malnutrition in different parts of the world. You can see Asia, Pacific, or Africa. You can see that malnutrition is greater. In developed countries, it is less. You can see how this continues to increase in the underdeveloped or less developed countries. Processing of all of these foodstuffs today, as we heard before, really, as I stated before, we really don't know where they come from. As Contreras stated, this is today, we're no longer afraid of this. We know the end result, the end product. We know where we buy the product, but we are unfamiliar and unaware of its source. According to the Spanish Food Safety Agency in 2010, the concerns of European consumers focused on food, and their concerns increasing. They were more concerned about residues of pesticides in fruits and vegetables or cereals, antibiotic residues or hormones in meat, animals that are cloned for, and the nutritional risks, contamination by bacteria of food. 15% were concerned about having healthy diet and a balanced diet. this is something that they would want to control. But you can see all of the different levels here of concern for different issues. The Eurobarometer did this study. It's published in November 2010. Europeans consider that they are well informed. The national European agencies that provide necessary information and control of food. The chemicals in food, currently there are 70,000 different chemical products available in the market, and every year at least 1,500 new ones are introduced in the marketplace. We have great number of pesticides, and some of them have been prohibited in the markets of the developed countries or used severely restricted. However, they're still commercialized in the less developed countries. Now, concerning pesticides in the United States, more than 17,000 pesticides have been registered. 76% are used in agriculture. Here you have a graphic representation of the distribution. In agriculture, for home use, insecticides, herbicides are also widely used in the U.S. According to the European Authority for Food Safety, EFSA, last year also, they showed that more than 70,000 samples of 200 different types of food were studied. 3.5% of the EU food did not pass the pesticide test. Limits have been established to determine whether this food can pass the test or not. The limitations for the presence of different parameters have been established. We should be concerned about these pesticides because they are accumulated in our body fat. And for children that have an immune system that is not yet fully developed, they can start accumulating traces of pesticides, and we're concerned that they can reach high levels of risk. Concerning lethal dose, DL50, this is the lethal dose that has been established. That is usually, this is a dose that can kill 50% of rats, for instance, because it's based on this type of study. We are assessing here only a specific pesticide, and this amount has been established for that pesticide. However, one toxin can provide a synergistic effect and make in combination with another toxin, and they become stronger. And we should take that into account, also the interaction of the presence of two different toxins. It is also depends on susceptibility of each individual. The level of susceptibility is not the same between individuals. What we have to do is take into account that this type of toxins also become accumulated. Pesticides and health, high levels of phosphorylated pesticide metabolites have been found in children's urine that had possibility of presenting disorders of hyperactivity and deficit of attention. According to a scientific study that is published, according to a national agency in the United States, and there's a risk that had been associated with use of pesticides, the presence of pesticide metabolites, and the risk of leukemia, dioxins, and also the burning of substances burning of material that contain this. Dioxins also persistent in the air, and many years are necessary to eliminate them from the environment completely, and they are accumulated in the fat of food, and When we take bluefish, for instance, meat, for instance, if they contain dioxins, that dioxin will be accumulated in our body fat. The European Food Safety Agency published a report on level of dioxins in food for human consumption, and 8% had far surpassed the maximum limits established. Biphenyl polychlorated agents, PCBs, are persistent. They're accumulated in animal fats. When they're burned, they produce more PCBs. According to the Environment Ministry, in 2001, there's 200,000 tons of PCBs. Many of these are found in food, although they had been prohibited since the 80s. Concerning the risks of dioxins and PCBs, prolonged exposure to dioxins has been related with immune system disorders, alterations in development of nervous systems, endocrine system, and reproduction function. The chronic exposure in animals also leads to various types of cancer. The exposure to PCB in children also lead to risk of developing cancer. Heavy metals also in fish. Fish is also contaminated with PCBs and dioxins. All of the residues that we produce are discarded in the sea, and this affects our water system. The Spanish Food Safety Agency has also conducted studies to determine the level of risk in a pregnant woman of 60 kilograms that takes 100 grams of fish a week. This overcomes the maximum tolerated dose that that person should take in a week. In children, this should be 50 grams, a very small size, and should not take more bluefish than 50 grams a week. And for the children aged 7 to 12 years, and not more than 100 grams for women that are pregnant and weigh 60 kilograms. Now, cadmium also is taken into account. Studies have been conducted to identify risks. This is present mainly in red meat
Sobre todo tenemos el cadmio.
of crabs. According to the ISAN, the consumption should be limited. It has a half-life of 20 to 30 years. This toxin can also be accumulated. Heavy metals, and health. Cadmium, this is considered to be category 1, cancergenic agent. Chronic intoxication has also been associated with renal function disorders, because of the chronic intoxication of cadmium also leads to chronic disorder of renal function. Methyl mercurium is neurotoxic. It crosses the placental barrier. And husbandry, intensive animal breeding. According to the FAO study, it has been shown that this has increased, and there's increase in meat production in developed countries. This has tripled and has gone from 50 million tons to up to 150 million tons. Hormones and anabolizing agents are used, antibiotics are used. We have the animal feeds also have these toxins, and cereals and transgenic soya have been used in animal feed. Animals are in small spaces and under temperature, lighting, and humidity conditions that are controlled. In France, there's a total of almost more than 1,000 tons of antibiotics used for these animals. used in intensive animal breeding. Intensive agriculture also utilizes pesticides to control pests. Biotechnology for seeds have led has led to has been developed to resist pests and to modify the nutritional profile of the food, modify organoleptic qualities, the use of chemical fertilizers rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium also has increased. And they are and there we have for soils that are poor in minerals, they receive, because of lack of rotation in the planting system, we see that has led to increase in the use of fertilizers rich in other chemicals. That has led to a drop in the amount of magnesium and deficit in copper content. And single culture, there's a loss in diversity.
Con el procesado de los alimentos también hay pérdidas
Processing of
nutricionales,
food has led
ejemplo,
to
es muy rico
nutritional
combinar los cereales,
deficits
aquí hay
also.
una
For
pérdida de
instance,
los cereales
cereals,
que
there's
tienen
80%
magnesio.
loss of
Usar,
magnesium.
no, las uvas almacenadas en cámaras frigoríficas hacen que exista una
Grapes are
pérdida del
stored
depósito de la vitamina C.
in
El secado de la carne un 90% de
in
tiamina, la congelación
coolers
de
have
la
led
carne un
to a
70%
drop
de
in
ácido
30% of vitamin
pantoténico, el
C.
blanqueado de los
There's a
cereales
loss in
procesado añade
pantothenic
mucho en la
acid
digestión de
when
vitaminas,
meat is
embarados
frozen.
almacenados en cámaras frigoríficas también
Dry
difieren
processing of
vitamina
meat
C,
has led to
incluso secado de la
90%
producción de
loss of
determinados nutrientes.
thiamine.
Tenemos aquí el
Other
sodio y el
nutrients have
potasio,
also been
porque
lost,
además
such
de
as
añadir
sodium
sustratos tienen
and
muchísimo más
potassium
nitrato que sodio y el
in
balance cambia
in
drásticamente cuando
carrots.
compramos esas cantidades
When these
enlatadas. Tiene
carrots
muchísimo más
are
sodio que potasio.
tinned or canned, there's more
Bueno, en cuanto a
sodium
los
than
aditivos
potassium.
alimentarios, lo primero que podemos
Concerning
estipular
the
es el hallazgo británico
additives,
de
this
Guardian
was
y es
taken
sobre
from The
cómo buscando
Guardian.
información sobre aditivos
Looking for
pues obtenemos
information
que había
on
muchos estudios hechos en
additives.
animales
We know that
que
there
lo
have been
vinculaban
studies
precisamente ellos
conducted in
con
animals. Many
determinados
have been
cánceres y determinadas
associated with
enfermedades,
certain
pero
types
luego
of
siempre se
diseases and
considera
certain
que estos estudios no
cancers.
son
And these
concluyentes.
studies,
El
however, are
negocio
not
mundial de
considered to be
aditivos ha
conclusive.
logrado más de 25.000
More than
millones de dólares anuales. Esta entidad del
$25,000
británico de Guardian en
million
el 2007. Aquí pongo algunos de estos
$25,000
estudios en los
million
que hablan de la contribución que
yearly
existe sobre ellos. Por
is
ejemplo, la
the
sacarina. En los años 70 se hicieron
value
muchos
of
estudios
the
en
additive
ratas sobre
business
los efectos que
worldwide,
producía la
according
sacarina y que
to
podían
The
producir cáncer de
Guardian.
vejiga. La sacarina fue prohibida en
Saccharin
Canadá, en
has been
determinados países, incluso en
associated
Estados Unidos.
with
Pues
bladder
Canadá le ponía
cancer.
un etiquetado que era
Saccharin
peligroso para la salud, como si
now has
ni
these
aceptaba.
labels
Sin
saying
embargo,
that
bueno,
it
ahora ya
is a
estos ya
risk,
están,
it's a health
ya no
risk,
están y ya se
but
puede
these
consumir
restrictions has been
sacarina
removed
normalmente
now.
en
Saccharin
Canadá y en
can be
Estados Unidos.
consumed in
Creo que
Canada and
ya
the
está
United States.
públicamente
Again, I
promocionado
think that these
y
labels
esto es lo
no
que
longer
los
exist.
expertos responden diciendo que este mecanismo se ha
Experts
probado
have
pero
stated
no en
that
animales. El
that risk
antídoto
has
es
been
un colorante.
established in
Se han hecho
rats,
estudios
but
que lo
not
relacionan con
in
cáncer cerebral.
humans. So that's the
La
reason why they
FDA
were able to remove
considera que
this
estos
label,
estudios no
and
son concluyentes,
saccharin can
es
be consumed
difamante,
again
también
in
se han hecho
Canada and
estudios
the United
relacionando con
States.
el cáncer de
Studies
vejiga.
have been
Se
done
prohibió
on
coagulación en
cyclamate
Venezuela
and
porque tenía muchísimo
blue
glutamato, pero la
2.
FDA vuelve a considerar que estos estudios no
Studies in
son
cyclamate have
concluyentes.
shown that
En
it
las
is
Bahamas en
associated
2007
in
se
bladder
realizaron
cancer
estudios en
in
ratas
animal
donde se
studies.
relacionaba con el cáncer
In
de mama,
countries
la
like
resistencia
Venezuela,
al
it has
linfoma
been
y la FDA también
prohibited.
considera que estos
Coke has
estudios
been
son concluyentes.
prohibited.
Total, al final estos aditivos nunca son prescripción,
Zero
los seguimos
Coke,
tomando, todos los
Coke
días
with
son
zero
medicamentos
caffeine has
porque
been
los estudios no son
prohibited because it
concluyentes. Sin embargo,
contains
la práctica
cyclamate. The
clínica
FDA
vemos
considers that
que
the studies are
muchísima
not
gente tiene
conclusive.
alergias
Aspart,
o intolerantes a
aspart,
ciertos aditivos y que responden muy
aspartame.
bien cuando estos aditivos se retiran de la
In
alimentación cuando
2007
dejan
in
de
Boulogne,
tomarse
studies
porque
were
algo
conducted in rats showing that
mucho.
its relationship with
Bueno,
breast cancer, ovarian
algo
cancer,
que también
etc.
tenemos que tener muy en cuenta es los nuevos
We
hábitos
should
alimenticios
also
como han
take into
cambiado.
account that there are
Ya
new
no existe una influencia de
eating
la cultura
habits.
y de la
There's less
religión
influence of
como
culture and
pasaba antes.
religion,
La
unlike in the
incorporación de la mujer
past.
al mundo laboral pues ha hecho que
Women
hoy en día
joining
pues,
the workforce has
tengamos
led
poco tiempo
to
para
less
cocinar y por eso
time
pues prima la
spent in the
rapidez, la
kitchen.
sencillez, la cultura del
More
fast food, que es
concern
la cultura
is
que hoy prima en
on
nuestra sociedad. Muchas
being able
cantidades
to
a
eat
bajos precios y a
quickly
baja calidad,
and
es lo que realmente estamos buscando,
easily. We
y
have the
la
fast food culture.
individualización del sistema de comidas.
And the
Tercer fin,
food system has become
reducir de esta
individualized.
manera. Hoy en día
According to Herpin, there is a lack of concentration. That is, we no longer have 3 or 4 meals. We have snacks frequently. We no longer eat together with the family. We are not synchronized. We no longer have a timetable for our meals, and we eat anywhere, on the sofa, and not at the table. And we always emphasize the need to eat fast, quickly, although the nutritional contents of this type of food, the fast food, is really very poor. According to the FAO, in 2020, two-thirds of mortality worldwide will be ascribable to non-transmissible chronic diseases, mostly are clearly linked to eating, to food. EPIC studies on 10 European countries correlated nutritional habits, eating habits with certain cancers. It is estimated that 30-40% of cancer incidents can be prevented by taking dietary measures. Control of weight and physical activity. Consumption of fruits and vegetables provide protection vis-a-vis cancer in general, whereas processed meat intake predisposed to development of cancer. Now I'll be speaking about food as therapeutic, as therapy. Patients should be considered physically, emotionally, and mentally in relation to the environment. Food, lifestyle, environment are the main tiers on which to base treatment of any type of chronic pathology. Optimum nutrition is emphasized. We need the nutrients necessary to be able to carry out our biological functions correctly, and this should be adapted according to each individual. Food is the main source of contamination or entry of toxins in our body. These are the points I would like now to emphasize in regard to treatment with in regard to nutritional treatment. Reduce toxin load in food, toxin burden in food, avoid nutritional deficiency. We should also assess possible food intolerance. We should have a rotational type of diet, and we must emphasize the importance of the intestinal flora and the intestinal permeability syndrome is important. Anti-inflammatory use. No, food should be anti-inflammatory. It should be adapted to each individual lifestyle and needs. Toxin-free food is necessary to have ecological food, ecological meat products, choice of natural food without additives or chemicals added, and should be toxin-free. Concerning the ecological food, these are vegetables that are produced without any type of chemicals nor transgenic seeds. This production should be sustainable. There should be rotation of the plants and use of autochthon species better adapted to the environment is emphasized. Animals' life should be as natural as possible. No chemicals in their feed, and they should be allowed also to pasture and to move. Concerning fish, bluefish and larger fish are contaminated, and these pollutants or toxins are accumulated in animal fat. And those that are bigger and are are exposed for a longer period of time have accumulated more of these toxins. we should take into account the different the species of fish. It depends also where they are caught, but that's very difficult to determine, and it's very difficult to know where the fish really come from, because they may be in areas in water that have higher levels of mercury and toxins, but it's impossible to determine that. Now, cooking also, how we cook, the cooking materials that we use can also produce or transmit toxins. Lead, for instance, cooking utensils with lead, with aluminium, can release particles that are toxic. Aluminium has been associated with Alzheimer's disease. Teflon releases PCOA, which is bioaccumulable in our body, and that has been related with cancer, liver injury, endocrine disorders, and immune system derangement or disorders. Copper material, for instance, plastic materials, since we use the microwave, these plastic materials also release bisphenol A, styrene, and phthalates. We should take into account the use of less toxic materials, stainless steel, made of stainless steel, and anti-adhesive materials. We should use some carbon better than other materials used for the anti-adherence. What we have listed here has been considered to be 2A cancergenic products. Acrylamide exposed to high temperatures, fried potatoes have high acrylamide content. This has been related with uterus and ovary cancers. Nitrosamine in meat with nitrites, cured meat, smoked meat. They produce nitrosamine that is also cancergenic. It has been chiefly associated with GI cancer. Heterocyclic amines also in meat that are treated at high temperature has been related to colon and rectal cancer. So we should use a low temperature. 110 degrees is considered to be the adequate temperature. Above 110, there will be more toxic substances released, and also a greater loss of nutrients. Concerning intestinal microbiota, it is important to determine whether biosin is present or not. If we assess for presence of candida, and treatment should be specific for that individual. Microbiota has a lot of metabolic functions. It helps us in the metabolism of different vitamins, lipids, lactose. Lactose is very common. There is an intolerance to lactose. This is due to intestinal dysbiosis. And we should take into account trophic function, the protective function. I'm not going to focus on this biosis now, but it is food related, and the intestinal permeability syndrome is important to remember also, because there are more entry of toxins into our body. So we should take into account the leaky gut syndrome also. Leaky gut syndrome. Food can be beneficial in many types of pathologies. Studies have demonstrated that. Evidence have been presented, such as the benefits for cystic fibrosis, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes mellitus type 2, etc. And if the diet is not correct, an inflammatory process will be produced. What about the pro-oxidant and antioxidant effects? That should be taken into account in the diet. There can be stress at level of the cell membrane. A subclinical inflammation can be produced that's impossible to control, and it's necessary to provide antioxidants to prevent that. Insulin is important also. Insulin levels Insulin levels are related also to the production of cytokines. The sugar content also is important. Sugar is quickly absorbed by the body. The amount of sugar is also important, and that has to be taken into account when we develop or prepare an anti-inflammatory diet, and the type of fat that we take. Those that favor production of prostaglandins, pro-inflammatories or anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, arachidonic acid, which is found in meat fat, in dairy products. Omega-6 is also important. We should we know that the metabolic pathways for omega-3 and omega-6 share enzymes, and we should not abuse the use of omega-6 or 3. So we need supplementation that contain omega-3. Before, meat had omega-3 because the animals were fed in a different way, and now the meat no longer contain omega-3. And fish, we keep saying that we should limit the intake of fish, and although there appears to be a contradiction because some fish contain a high level of omega-3, but that can also be obtained from vegetables. We should also take into account intolerance. We should avoid intolerance to food. Avoid food that produces intolerance. Omega-3 fatty acids are important. They're found in bluefish, but we should take the smaller sized fish. This is also present in seeds. Antioxidants in leafy vegetables, green tea, onions, red fruit, etc., fiber-rich food, and sugar content, cereals, use stevia instead of sugar. But when we remove sugar, many people say, well, they do not get accustomed to that, and they take a food that contains sugar. But it's much better to give them sugar instead of other products. But I recommend this stevia, which is an extract, a plant extract, and it's a sweetener, not a chemical sweetener. Dry fruit also contain low sugar content, and the types of food that have anti-inflammatory substances such as ginger, cayenne.
Que muchas veces si quitamos la sal, pues la persona dice es que no me sabía nada la comida.
And we also have to reduce the intake of salt. You have these different substances that are used for food, rosemary, ginger, etc. We should adapt diet to each patient. It should be adapted to patient's lifestyle, patient's tastes, and patient's dislikes. It should be adapted also to patient's pathological condition and physiological needs, status in intestine, presence of dysbiosis, and also the cost. We should also take into account that information is required on nutrition in order to get rid of these false beliefs. If you give them food that they do not understand, a diet that they do not understand, and they see that the rest of the world, the people around them, are eating a different way, well, they won't be able to follow and follow that diet. So it's necessary to take time to explain things to them and also look for new alternatives. I'm sure that there are many, many different types of food products that we do not know of. Now we know more about algae, etc., certain types of cereals, other vegetables that we were unfamiliar with before. It's necessary to include them in our diet in order to cover all the dietary needs and in order to have the supplementation required. Thank you very much for your attention.